All right, so here we've got the Armadillo, as I'm referring to it, 2012 Nissan Armada. In the air on the lift, everything's stable, double checked everything. So let's go under, get a little look-see. Front suspension. You see, this is typical. I was talking about vehicles from the north having some rust on them. Now, this is not bad. This is not bad at all. You can see everything looks really clean. Let's see if I can get a little wider beam on this light here. There we go, that's a little better. You can kind of see everything. Suspension looks good, but it is probably mostly original and has some wear. Replacing these front struts, that's probably another $300 or $400 job that I'm gonna have to do soon, and I'm prepared for that. Ball joints, you can see that one up there, it's got some oil on it. This one down here, not bad, boots intact. Everything looks good, all my hoses and everything looks fine. A little bit of rust on these lower control arms, but they're not ate through. Not bad. CV shaft looks good. Like I said about this thing being clean, it's very clean under here. You don't see any oil really. I've got a little oil coming from somewhere up there. I'll have to investigate it, but it's not bad. You can see the side of the engine up there, clean, no rear main leak. Here's the suspension on this side. Everything looks nice and clean, not bad. Underneath here, not bad. CV shaft looks good. The guy was saying at the front end shop that my camber bolts, which are right here and here, are adjustable, and he's correct. Those are not adjustable, so I'm gonna have to put in some adjustable camber bolts so that they can get this thing aligned properly. Everything looks good, but I mean, when we start talking about inspecting these vehicles and understanding what they're going to require, you've got outer tie rod ends, we've got an inner tie rod end, we've got CV shafts, we've got shocks and struts, we've got upper ball joint, lower ball joint, stabilizer bar, end links and things, bushings here, bushings all up in here, bushings here, bushings on the upper control arm. You can't see from here, but they're there. Wheel bearings, brakes. I mean, there's a lot of parts right here, and you could be looking at, in order to do all of this per side, you're probably looking at, I'm just gonna ballpark say $500 or $600 per side if you're really going to rebuild one fully. But that's things that you got to save your money for and be prepared for. Let's look at the exhaust. Rusty, but it's not rusted out. Frame looks clean. Transmission, I don't see any leaks. This is a four-wheel drive unit. You can see the engine up there, nice and clean. Exhaust on this side looks good. Crossover pipe looks in satisfactory condition, but we see some rust. We see some moisture forming around there. No leaks out of this transmission, it doesn't look like. Everything looks good there. Drive shaft U-joint, sometimes those have greasable fittings in them. But we look at this muffler, massive 20-gallon muffler, looks like. Not rusted out, looks pretty good. Frame. Under the body, no damage. Body bushings look to be okay. But then we get back here to the rear suspension. We're going to talk about that because that's what I missed. And I'll show you the vantage point that I looked at it from that made me think everything was okay. So everything pretty much here forward, not bad, I think you would agree. Now when I did my inspection of this vehicle, I laid down underneath it and I looked back here. Okay, I see those control arms, that upper control arm is rusty, and I can see there's some rust up in there. I see some rust around here, but it doesn't look like it's terrible, you know? And I see rust here forming. It's starting to get a little thicker on this little rear subframe. But again, nothing that made me panic. And then I look at this side and I see that lower control arm's been replaced. That lower control arm's been replaced. and the upper control arm's been replaced. Shocks, those are factory Nissan shocks, probably factory coils too. So back here, I see everything looks okay. I've got a clamp up there on my air conditioner lines for the rear that is rusted out, but not bad. That's probably from condensation on the lines, and they just sweat and that just rusts. So from this angle, I thought, you know, yeah, it's been driven on some salt roads, not bad. But here's what I didn't look at. Oh my God, you see that? That front control arm here, this lower front control arm here is 8 up. We look up in here, this subframe is 8 up. That upper control arm is 8 up. Again, factory shocks. This one's also been hit right here. Looked like they run over a curb or something and it's been bent. That's what he meant when he said it was bent, but he didn't say anything about it being rusted out completely. And then I look across the rest of this rear subframe here, and it's got some rust. It's not looking good. And then I look there, and there's a hole in that subframe. It's rusted out. It's rusting from the inside out. So that's what I say. I missed something pretty big on this. If I would have seen all this, if I'd have had a lift and I could have got it up there and inspected it fully, I would have known this was a much bigger repair, and I would have negotiated the price some more. I mean, look at the inside of that control arm, the bushings and stuff. And that's probably because when they're driving it on a salt road or whatnot, the front's not getting a whole lot of that. You know, the front's not getting a lot of that stuff on it. Now, I haven't washed this vehicle or nothing. This is exactly how I bought it. So you can tell, I believe this little rear seal here on the front four-wheel drive unit, front axle, may be leaking a little bit there. But again, it's not anything that scares me. I'm gonna have to address it eventually. But when you're driving, all that salt and spray and stuff is kind of coming up on the back. I expected to see a little more frame rust, but I think I can wire brush this and clean this up pretty good and save it from getting any worse. But this rear subframe, you can see the exhaust is a little more rusted back here. Frame back here looks okay, but that subframe, look, there's more holes up there. I mean, it's not good. And so I've got all these suspension components here coming. This lower control arm, the lower forward control arm, the upper control arm, and this lower rear control arm. Yeah, look, I mean, I didn't see that whenever I was laying on the ground. From this vantage point, this is what I saw. And I saw the rust and stuff, but I didn't think that it was as bad as it is. So this is going to be our project as soon as the rest of my parts come in. Today, we're going to change the engine oil. We're going to do that right here. And I think I've got to take off this skid plate. I think there's another front sump on the oil pan. And then we're going to pull that drain plug. Thank goodness Nissan put in a drain plug. We'll drain that transmission fluid and we'll drop this pan and replace the filter on it as part of my planned maintenance here today. Gives me a good basis and a good ground zero to start from. But anyways, now you kind of know what I know and what some of my plans are for this thing. Rebuild this back suspension right here for now. Put on new shocks and coil springs that are more heavy duty. If they don't carry the vehicle weight or if it remains bouncy, then I'll put some helper airbags inside of the coil springs. They make them about 125 bucks. And then eventually down the road, I'm gonna be replacing this complete subframe that unbolts from the frame here, and I can replace that whole thing. But then I gotta drop the entire rear end. That just ain't something I'm gonna do today. I don't see that it's got, other than that spot up there, that's the worst of it. And I think I can overlay that with some metal and weld it and re-strengthen it. just to buy me some time. You know, I don't want to take my daily driver down out of service right this minute and wait to order a subframe. And it's an idea, and it's also a money thing. You know, we go into it with plans for what we're going to spend on it, and then we find more. One other thing, talk about this suspension while it's got it up. You saw that's air shocks. This is the compressor for it. Now this compressor works fine, but when I got it, this little arm right here was bent, and that arm, this little plastic arm, was disconnected from this ride level sensor. I hooked it all back up, did some adjustment, and it tries to air it up, but in the end, I think the bags are leaking too bad because they're original, and you know, just gonna have to replace these air shocks. Just gonna have to replace them. So I've got new springs and shocks, and we'll be doing that probably next weekend.